And we're live. Welcome back to the Weekly Roundup. Happy Friday. We're going to jump right in on it. What's going on in the yoga world? What's the news? Here's the news. Owning a yoga studio has an interesting duality. Oh, hang on. Sorry, you guys. I heard myself on the live coming on. The duality of owning a yoga studio, the difficulty, the irony is that the purpose of the studio is to be open and to accept people of all shapes, sizes, experience levels, opinions, looks, ages, whatever. Hence, the most common marketing phrase, as much as I poo-poo on it all the time, is yoga for everybody. You know, and as much as that isn't, in my opinion, the best marketing phrase, like that's used literally everywhere all over the world, whether it's individual teachers, studios, online, whatever. The duality is, with open arms and an open heart, you open a studio and you invite people in to come in with their own shit, with their own drama, with their own hardships, even as simple as they just got a sore back, and as complex as they're fighting cancer, have mental wellness issues, extreme anxiety. A recent study in the United States said that between the ages of 21 and 30, at least 60% of women report being so stressed and anxious on a day-to-day basis that they cannot function normally. Like, that's the mental health crisis that we're experiencing right now. The problem is, when you open yourself up, and in a business sense here, to being the place where people can come for that kind of stuff, you also simultaneously open yourself up to having to take on some of that shit, or them like sending that to you. We're trying to be open to help people and offer something that's a powerful service. And some weird, twisted way, people in general, employees, clients, etc., feel that creates a relationship where it's acceptable to be ultra scrutinizing and maybe a little bit extreme in the expectations that are imposed on you, and opinionated as if they should share their deeper opinion and that they should really control your business. Now, on the simplest level, what I'm talking about here is someone who comes in and says, like, I think you should do a class at this time and I would come more, or someone who asks for a deal on something, or someone who buys a 10-class pass, takes 5 of the classes, and then asks for a refund on the last 5 because I just don't feel like practicing anymore. Where the same person wouldn't necessarily behave in that same way in other business context. But the deeper level is a client who we've been working with for a while, off and on, just had a pretty extreme scenario, and the backstory matters for this to have context. 2-owner studio. They used to be married. They're not married. They haven't been married for over a decade. They have a child together. They're copacetically co-managing and running the studio. One of them recently, big scandal breaks. He was arrested at the Canadian border. Surprise, surprise. And for a warrant for his arrest that he did not know was there, that had only been out for a couple of years, and was for sexual misconduct. And the story finally comes out that what had happened was, he was like, this was from like 25 years ago when he was maybe 19 years old. And he hooked up or something with someone who was too young in a wrong scenario. So not a violent crime, definitely illegal, not something to condone, and something that is, the truth is, I don't know, something that does happen in the world. So he gets busted for it. First off, no one knows that this is happening. He didn't even know. He gets arrested, and then we fast forward maybe a week later, the news breaks at the studio about this somehow, and all hell breaks loose. Literally a couple hundred members cancel their membership. Disgruntled employees from the past come out of the woodwork and start complaining about things that are totally unrelated. Half of the team quits the studio and leaves. By the way, it's like in 15 or 18-year studio. So the business basically almost sinks. It's on the ropes. And to make it worse, the other owner, ex-wife, who had no idea about this, was not with a person at this time, didn't understand, has no anything, immediately pushes him out of the business, takes all the shares. He loses all of his money, connection, everything that has to do with the business. Like immediately this happens, no thought at all. Hires an HR firm to get the message right about how it's a safe space. We don't condone this, etc. Does all the right things, checks every fucking single box. And still people come in and are giving her shit about being an enabler. They're accosting her children. She has to leave the country and go hide in the boonies to sort of keep herself and her current family, their shared daughter and her other children safe, which I totally understand as a parent. And day before yesterday, it got so bad that, and she also is a part owner in another studio that he is not involved in. Somehow that studio picks it up. And someone even starts an Instagram account called Rage Against the Yoga Machine and starts slandering them all over Instagram because they're upset about something, people just like jump on the bandwagon of insanity. So day before yesterday, finally, the man who was accused of this, who I've been to their studio and worked with and talked with and everything, unalived himself. Because it's on YouTube, I don't know if we're even allowed to say the words anymore. Unalived himself.
He succumbed to suicide.
But I think that word we're not allowed to say.
Oh.
I don't know. This is the thing. You've typed the word. Well, we've said it now. If you type suicide into AI bots, you say it on TikTok, Instagram Reels, or whatever, it gets flagged and taken down. You can't even talk about this shit. So it enrages me because on so many levels, as a man, as a father, and again, not condoning any of his actions at all, or that he shouldn't be in jail, maybe, like, I don't know, but like that, we didn't get to see that play out. But now we have a situation where two businesses are struggling. One of them is like literally on the ropes of potentially going under, like has to completely rebuild from scratch after 18 years or something like this. Someone's dead, which is terrible. Any human being, I just don't think that's just terrible, especially this path. A family is destroyed, and the ripple effects and repercussion of this will last for years across multiple people. For what? So I don't know. That's the backstory. The duality of owning a studio is we open ourselves up to be helpful to people and simultaneously open ourselves up to the risk of, judgment in a really extreme way. And there have been many studios that have gone through extreme cancel culture, especially in the last years. We had a group that tried to cancel me at one point and was labeling me a racist. And so, like, it made no sense. It still makes no sense. It's not logical, but like, people get upset about something. And if cancel culture starts around your business, then a lot of other people are like, just, I don't know, there's waiting for the cause to jump on, and like, yeah, it can snowball in a really bad way fast. So this is scary stuff. This is an extreme situation. I do feel like it's our obligation to just talk about it straight up, because this is the conversations that don't happen in the yoga world. Because you know what else happens now? This will get fucking swept under the rug. It's not going to get talked about anymore. People will shut the fuck up. And that Instagram account that was Rage Against the Yoga Machine and had like all these negative posts on it and stuff, guess what? It's private. First, they deleted everything that was on it, and now it's private, like in less than 24 hours. Like, what cowardice is this? So I think that it's important to have these conversations, and I feel like part of our moral obligation and service to the larger yoga business community is to bring up these topics and talk about them and challenge the status quo, because when it gets this bad, it's already like you can't do anything about it in that moment. All you can do is troubleshoot. How do you preempt this? How do you protect yourself? How do you, I don't know. Anyways, I'm rambling now. Vicky, what do you think?
Yeah, so many of these things resonate with me, from the name of that account to everything that you said. I mean, first of all, this is such a horrible situation. But what you said about studio owners, us as studio owners, what we do something because we want to help people, and we put everything into that. And we open ourselves up to so much. And I remember very clearly when I was going to open my studio, before it was open, I went to this continued education training with Craig Viliani, and there was a bunch of studio owners there, and one of them came over to me and he said, be ready for something when your studio is open. People will attack you. And I thought, this is such a strange thing to say, and this guy seems a bit intense. Why is it like, what is he talking about? I didn't understand it. I thought it was very strange, but of course, now many years later, I totally see like how this happens. Like you say, people come to us for many reasons, and a yoga studio is such a special business. Nowhere else will people come and take their shit out on you, and you have to carry that as an owner. The name again, the Rage Against the Yoga, I feel this is kind of what it's about in their minds sometimes. That especially if the studio is pretty nice, then they think, they don't understand that it's often a single owner and a person behind this, you know, responding and carrying whatever they throw at it. They think it's a machine. They don't understand.
Or what's worse, I know the person who started that Instagram account. I've had conversation with them. Did sales training with them. And I know for a fact that they know exactly who the owners are, like on a personal face-to-face daily interaction level. Like it's almost even worse. Sorry, yeah.
They know it's not a machine, but sometimes I think people think it's a machine that they're raging against, and that it's okay to rage against that machine, but it's not, because that rage is going to hit the owner. So, I mean, what can you do? It can be such a heavy burden, like mental health wise, to carry all this. Like, apart from this situation, which is so extreme, that rage against the machine that we get, what do you do to mitigate it, and what do you do to carry it? So, I mean, a few things, starting from the really basic, is to try to disassociate yourself from anything like messages and such like that comes to you personally. And I still know a bunch of studio owners who are, for example, in charge of the studio's Instagram account, and kind of allow messages to come, like a conversation with students about memberships and, you know, suspensions and cancellations, and answer them, like, and WhatsApp messages sometimes even, or even that the mobile number is there for students to interact with. Like, absolutely get rid of that. Even if you haven't had any rage against your machine or what they think is a machine yet, just don't have any of that. Like, take it away. Nothing should be going to you personally. And then the second step is to try to delegate out, even before, you know, things go bad. Delegate out the responding of emails and responding to that conversation to someone. I mean, we know that a lot of studios don't have front desk staff or don't have enough hours, but it really should be a priority to have someone else to deal with that, just the answers and responses and that communication with students. Try to remove yourself from it, because even though you can do it, you think you save some money on doing it, and you know everything better. Like it's heavy to do that. I know I did that for myself. The first 5 years of my studio, I did all of it. And when I stopped, it was such a relief. And then the third thing is that it's not just students, but it's teachers as well. So the third step would be to try to delegate HR responsibility to someone else. At least for some things, like you probably need to be there in some way, shape, or form to be the leader, and in a positive way motivate your team. But the little nitty-gritty that kind of annoys and grates on you, like making the schedule and things like that, can you delegate that out as well? So those are just 3 things off the top of my head that I can think about to, protect yourself as the owner and just help you carry the responsibility and sometimes the burden, and to just make your life more, make ownership more joyful. It should be joyful. Our job is to spread joy and spread happiness. But yeah.
To your point, I totally agree about trying to separate yourself from some of those things like email and the things like that. And if it isn't possible, if you're in the early stages, just not possible, then there are ways you can separate yourself as well. Like, for instance, not if you have your own email account, have a hello at Nomad Yoga Studio or at info at yoga, Nomad Yoga Studio, where that's the client facing email. And so then at least you have that as the client facing email. So when you're getting some things, regardless of whether it's membership cancellations, or I can only feel for the woman that is handling the communications at this studio, the type of hate email that she's getting right now, right? And she just works there. I mean, she's not even, and so be that as it may, is this, if you have this like info at Nomad Yoga Studio, then at least you can not check it. Say to yourself, I am not checking this between this time and this time. I learned the hard way not to check my email at 10 o'clock at night, right? Because I got an email one night and it just made me so mad and so upset that I tossed and turned and slept about it all night.
Don't check it in the pub either.
Yeah, don't check it. Oh, but actually maybe checking the pub's not a bad idea after a couple of drinks, right? Anyway, but there are things you can do. And then truthfully, if you are in a contentious situation, whatever it may be, you can create some templated emails, and you can acknowledge the email because I sometimes think not acknowledging can put fuel on the fire, but acknowledge and have it. So is it almost like just I send it out, right? So you can do some of those things. And yeah, definitely not your personal cell phone number. Google Voice. You could get a Google Voice phone number. I know some studios don't even have a studio phone number anymore, which fine. In today's world, maybe you don't need it. However, sometimes it's maybe not a bad idea to have it. And, or like I said, Google Voice that you answer during specific times, right? And, so maybe some other AI tools like a chat bot or something like that can help field a lot of these things. So even if you're I'm not to the level yet where I can delegate some of these things out, my team's too small, there still are things you can do that help protect you and give you that personal space as well. And then to echo Vicky's point too is, and this is probably the hardest thing as a business owner, is not taking it personally. And you have to put on your Teflon suit sometimes. And it's in some cases, people are projecting their fear, their anxiety, their construct onto you. And we have to, you put on our Teflon suit, let them be heard, and then respond in a way that lets them know they're heard. And then you can say what you need to say. And sometimes it might just be, I hear you and I'm doing the best I can. But it's not taking it personally. And I know that's the hardest thing to do. Because we get into it because we're passionate. We get into this because we want to help people. And the very people that we want to help are now turning around and attacking us. And including, I think sometimes the worst offenders can be your own staff. Like in
definitely 100%. We've seen that in the on-sites this year.
Yeah, it's like people feel that somehow they can tell the owner what to do, or put their own judgment or their own, their project what they're coming from, which is a normal human condition to do that. And then again, but it's not very yogic, right? It really isn't very yogic. I mean, one thing, look into that mirror. It's like, come on, guys, what's going on here with yourself? And so it's not yogic at all to like just go in with vitriol against someone. It's very opposite of what yoga is about.
Well, I want to spin on that. First off, I have to comment. I think well-seasoned cast iron suit, because it's stronger and cooking with Teflon is bad for you.
Okay.
But I get that.
Are you talking about chainmail or full
I'm talking about
Wait,
chainmail.
Vicky has this suit. Like Vicky already has this suit. That's why she's such a strong, resilient owner.
Okay.
She just goes in with roll in with the chainmail. Yeah, full plate.
Oh, you're gonna have to come on a roundup one day, Vicky, in your full LARPing outfit. We want to see it. We want to see.
We're all coming on. No, we're all coming on in a full LARPing. It's official.
Okay.
Here's one of the thoughts, and I'm working on sort of like a blog post around this, just because I need to process my own thoughts on it. It's hard to even articulate. Like, this is upsetting on so many levels. I don't like the idea of cancel culture in a lot of ways, yet at the same time, you should stand up for what's right in the world and speak up, and business leadership is a component of this, if not the most important leadership of our time, in my opinion, because there's a lot of like duality that's happening with this. But I was thinking about, there is a version of the Bhagavad Gita that has an insert in the front of it that is written from the Dalai Lama, and he is talking about ahimsa, the idea of non-harming or non-violence. And it's very fascinating because it was the first time, and I've since heard and read about the concept to understand it personally a little bit deeper, but it was the first time that I had the concept reintroduced outside of the simplicity that we talk about it. The idea of himsa, non-harming, is not actually the right translation. It's reduction of your direct harm in the world, because to be completely harmless is not possible unless you're going to go live in the cave. Like, it's not possible. So it's harm reduction, not non-harming. And the second thing is, it also means that, and this was his big point, was non-harming also means that you must stand up at the moment that you are experiencing harm outside of yourself, not towards you, and stand against it. If someone is harming someone else, part of ahimsa is you will also not stand for harm. You must stand up and help, even if it means fighting, which sounds counterintuitive around the whole concept of non-harm. So it's not about being complete pacifist, but actually being in an active state of non-harm. In the yoga world, where we see this play out in this example here with this extreme cancel culture situation, is people are too late to the game. The moment of non-harm was when this person did this bad thing and no one else stood up, said something, did something, called them on it, got them arrested, punched them in the face, whatever it was. And maybe that wasn't possible, but like, that's the moment of the standing up against it. Now, 25 years later, and deciding to like ruin the family and the business and everything else that the person's not even associated with it at that point, and blaming the other ex-wife and owner about being it's misguided principled fighting, in my personal opinion. This is my personal opinion here.
It's causing harm. It's causing harm.
It's actually causing harm.
It's causing unbelievable harm. And when you said before about this absolutely, just think of his daughter. She's going to carry this for the rest of her life. It has transformed this young woman who's right at the cusp, right as the critical teenage years, Can you imagine? I mean, it's just like the devastation this poor young woman, this poor youngster is feeling right now, as well as her other siblings too. But even still, it has fundamentally changed the course of her life because of this harm, or at least harm that these people did.
Well, so the extension of this in my, like where my mind's going, and with Vicky giving really practical tips on a larger ethereal level, one of the things that I'm toiling with is like, as a yoga business, also, how do yoga businesses almost fail their community? I mean, like on one hand, look, guys, we're just trying to offer some yoga classes here, like do some stretching postures and love yourself, because you get that technique works for introspection. You know, you're not a mental health place. You're not supposed to be counseling people on a deep level. That's not what it is. And we all know that that gets incorporated into it. And again, like one of the most valuable, you ask any studio owner out there, these guys included, what's the best part about your studio? The community. Community is the best ever. They got our back. They support us through COVID. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Until they don't like something.
Until they fucking turn on you.
Yeah. Now, a lot of the community did not turn on them and supported them too. So we have to say that. I'm just saying, where the larger yoga industry may have failed is the fact that this type of conversation, like the larger cultural moments of cancel culture and pushback and whatever else, has been allowed. That like the teachings and the personal strength and the nothing stealing your peace and the ahimsa and the astya and the yama niyama of yoga practice has not translated into many of the yoga communities. And you could theorize that if it did, was prevalent enough, strong enough, understood enough, that this sort of stuff would probably be more avoidable, because people would maybe look at it more critically, have a more critical mind about it, a bigger awareness of themselves, and sort of like the group culture that they're playing into and perpetuating. Which goes back to the Krishnamacharya quote we always talk about: yoga will be the greatest gift to the world in 150 years' time. That was maybe 90 something years ago. And we're also seeing, just take note, it was only 20 years ago you had to explain what yoga was at all. It was only 10 years ago that we talked about why yoga is good for you, but it was very like fitness, physical based. Now it's much more like relaxative, mental, but also physical based. We're still not at the real depth. We're still not all the way, into it, but we're on that path. So I hope that in the future, the yoga gift to the world gets to the depth that we have enough people who understand themselves deeply enough and are self-aware enough to not participate in this type of harm towards the studio. That's my hope. Carol, I mean, I don't know. Got anything to add here?
I mean, I don't know if I have much to add. I appreciate this whole discussion so much. I think something that a lot of studio owners, when they're going into it, they're really not prepared for at all. It's interesting because and I'm working with somebody right now who's about to open in about a week or so, week and a half. And it just came up this week that she's like, I want to really set boundaries with certain teacher. She can tell already with the staff that she needs boundaries and expectations. And, we talked about like, really, you can do the best you can to set this up, but sometimes you're going to be blindsided. Sometimes you're just going to be prepared for what comes at you. So pause, it's really hard not to take things personally. I mean, I owned that studio for 19 years and I was probably like 15 years into it before it really was able to say, this is not about me. And I recognize too that, sorry, I see my internet is funky. Like I needed to focus on the positive things, because you also, on the flip side of that, will get the most beautiful cards and emails. And like, you cannot believe the impact that you're making on people. And that's like, you get it and you see it and you're like, wow, this is why I do it. And then you forget about it because something else comes along that just slaps you in the face, and that's what sticks with you. So I don't know. I kept every card, I kept every email. And when there was shit going down, I had to look this pile of like lovely thoughtful emails that are coming towards me. I got one this week, and I sold the studio almost a year ago. And this woman, sent an email saying how much it meant when she was at the studio. And she had won some awards. So she got me a massage. Like, I haven't owned the studio for a year.
That's
So
awesome.
it's, that duality is there. So I think it is hard to know. You can't predict everything. Focus on the positives when you can. I don't know what else to really say about it, but it's,
No, I think it's a great point that I was just taking a note for myself even here. No, negativity impacts you 10 times stronger than positivity, like depending on which study you read, but like you'll get 3 cards like that and someone buys you a massage and someone makes you a testimony about how you changed their life. And then one person comes in and says, I think you're an asshole. And like, that's all you can think about for the next 24 hours. So that buffering yourself part, you're right. When you first open a studio, you are naive to the fact that you are opening yourself up to this. That's this duality, going back to the beginning of this conversation today. That's tricky. So having these boundaries with staff, with clients, whatever, I think is important. One other practical thought, and then let's keep this going because there's some other stuff to talk about today. The one practical technique, spinning off of Vicky's concepts here, I think as well, and this is maybe less tangible in like one moment, but is like a generalized technique. If you are, how do we say it? Like if you're the captain of the ship, like if you're actually leading and you're driving the bus or like whatever driving analogy we want here, and you're the one communicating sort of down, not in a better or worse sense, but in like you own the place. You're the one who's leading the whole thing. If you're in control of communication and narrative with your team and with your clients, if you're the one who's actually leading the community, if you're the starting point of the conversations and everything else, that's actually not only a more powerful place to be in your business, but a safety mechanism. One thing that I know for sure, because I've seen it literally hundreds of times on the ground in studios, will happen, is if you don't tell the community and your team what you are, the value you offer, what you're about, what's appropriate, what's the culture, then they'll tell you.
They'll define it.
They'll define it for you. It's going to happen either way. There's no way around that. So if you don't tell them, they'll tell you. And the problem with them telling you is that then if you change anything, no one likes it because it seems like you're fighting against them even when you're not. I mean, like simple stuff. You change a schedule, you change a pricing option, people think that they, should have input on it. And in the worst case scenario, we get to this extreme where it's like people view the community from a perspective that subconsciously, maybe even that like they're the ones who have developed it and therefore can also be up in arms about it in a bigger way. Whereas if you're driving it and you're the one defining it, keeps it cleaner that way. So practically speaking, like literally take ownership of your business. That's another thing. Starting a studio, a lot of people starting, I remember thinking this too, like, oh yeah, just to your teachers, just call me anytime there's a problem, or I'll help you do this, or we'll do that. But you're like, you're not going to be able to do that for the next 10 years. That's not real. So, and that sets a precedent of you not really like taking the lead, rather than saying like, here's how we do this and why and how we can and how I can help you succeed, versus do whatever you want, Carol, teach your class. I just happy that you're here helping me out.
Yeah.
Because that's how it can feel when you start. Yeah.
Josh, it makes me think when you said that, starting out, I think another time where it can be challenging is, and I experienced this myself, is when you buy an existing studio. That can be
Yes.
a vulnerable moment in your leadership, is you're coming in and maybe you want to make changes or things like that. So navigating that can take some time and thought and having a plan for it. And particularly if you are going to make some significant, excuse me, wholesale changes. Hold on a minute. Hold
All right, let's keep it rolling.
But I
Let's keep it
want
rolling.
to say that it goes back to the point I was going to make, Josh, is that it made me think of when you said that you knew someone who, and maybe this isn't a bad thing to do, is a new owner came in, basically fired everybody. Remember you're talking, and then they had
A mentor of mine years ago did this. Yeah.
and that's,
They literally walked in on day one. They walked in on day one and said, "You're all fired. No classes will run until we get the staff in order. You can reapply for your same job if you're interested." It was kind of an asshole move. I mean, it was an asshole, not kind of. It was absolutely an asshole move. But that was the shakeup that was necessary to turn it around, to make something really happen.
Yeah. Anyway.
So, all right. Top post in the YC, Terry.
Top post was from our friend Bridget Reagan at Honey Yoga in San Diego, and she was asking about what do you do, or what do studios do around teachers being solicited to do outside things. Specific example, she walked in and heard about a teacher came in the studio, and teacher was wrapping a class, and the teacher was advertising their own yoga retreat, hadn't said anything to Bridget about it. And of course, she's soliciting her clients, that they're her members, it's her studio. And then also additionally, how do you support your teachers? Because unless you are able to give them enough classes and that they can make a full-time living teaching at your studio, that's somewhat of a rarity. Usually most teachers are teaching at multiple studios and or have another full-time job somewhere, whatever it is. So where's that boundary? How do you set that? And I think it's, again, going back to Carol's point and all the points we always make, is what are the expectations of that? When you're thinking about setting up what the teachers can do, what they can't do, how does that work? And having that clearly defined. And sometimes you may not know it in the beginning, right? It's sometimes you don't know what you need to know until you know it. But thinking through what are the things and how to approach it, even like been working with a client on what's the process for workshops? I want to do a workshop. Okay, what's the split? How does this work? All of those things. So these are all things that you can define. And then the other thing I was going to chime in on that post about, and I still will, is not only about this type of thing, about what the expectations are for teachers soliciting for their products or things that they do, is what about personal boundaries? What are the expectations? What are the policies around dating students? What are the policies around just going out with students, right? Because we are in this sort of like very intimate space, and yet we're professional. So where is that line between being professional and being personal, and where do you cross over? Because I've seen this happen in studios, and I've been, I would say, a victim of it in a way, is that creates the cliques and the exclusivity, and you've got these little cliques and clubs and things like that, and people going out. And so how do you navigate that as well? So I think that's all part of this, and starting with what are your expectations as the owner and clearly defining them.
Vicki, what's been your experience with this? Because I mean, your studio is a good example. You have got it to a place where you operate it remotely. You have different genres. It's in a big city. Like, yeah, you have different teacher types. Like, how have you managed this?
Yeah, so the expectation that you can't solicit to students, that has been pretty clearly defined and like articulated to everyone who's there. So they're aware of that. Sometimes it's like for good and for bad, because then they monitor each other, and then they like, oh, this teacher did this and that's not okay. And then as the owner, I have to step in then, because even though I have a manager, this is like on that level where you can't really delegate that. So that can be a little bit tricky, but I think all you can do is make sure that everyone understands the boundary, and you do not solicit directly to our clientele. You can't do that. But it's such a tricky area. It really is. There's so many gray zones, because even when they don't say it directly in class, all the students are going to follow their Instagram account, because that's how things work now. So this, and we promote that as well. We don't try and put some kind of block against that happening. So we promote, of course, all the teachers, their own teacher Instagram accounts are constantly being referenced in our social media. So pretty much all the students who like a certain teacher will follow not only the studio, but they will follow that teacher. So it's in practicality, they actually do have access to our client list in a way. No one needs to go in these days and download something from Mindbody Online. They just don't need to, because it's already there. They already have access to this. Nobody would pay for this email list. It's pretty easy to get access to these students and these clients. And yeah, what can you say? It's going to happen, right? So for example, we haven't done any retreats. So then the teachers start to do retreats because there are students there who want to go on retreat. And I was trying to get my head around this, and I felt kind of, didn't feel really good. And I wanted to try and, in my mind, figure out how I could feel better about it, because I think I haven't put up any kind of rules that say they can't. So they can. So I was thinking okay, so I have this apple orchard that I've been growing for years with these beautiful apples. And what I use it for is I take the fruit and I cut the fruit, and I sell ready-made cut up apples, and they look beautiful. But the rest of the apple, there's always quite a lot of spillage there. And the rest of the apple is not being used for anything. I just leave it on the ground, actually. And then my teachers come in and they collect that, and they make apple cider, and they make some money from the apple cider. So
I literally thought you were saying you had an apple orchard for a minute. I was like, what? How did we not know you had an apple orchard? You're doing the next retreat at your house. What's going on?
Maybe I have a strange imagination, but sometimes for me, it's I have to have these pictures. I always picture myself, I'm the captain of the ship and I sail the ship. That's how I picture myself with the studio. So I always have to have something like that. So for me, this helped me feel better about it, because really I'm leaving a lot of fruit on the ground. Then they come in and they gather it up. And I haven't told them that they shouldn't gather it up. And why should I? It's usable fruit.
Yeah. Hey, side note, I grew up in the largest apple region in Canada. And apple picking is, there's a season where all the apples, you got to get them. And in Canada, because you got to get it before they frost as well. Anything that doesn't fall, you've got to beat the frost. And I met the guys who started this mobile apple juicing company for that exact reason. They just go through and they're like, we'll clean up your orchard. So they get all the apples for free. And it's a multi-million-dollar company, really big money. These orchards are all well, we're idiots.
But it's a little bit if you're not getting all the money out of your clientele that you could be getting them, you're not offering them all of the workshops that they want, all of the retreats that they want, all of the teacher trainings that they want. If you're not getting all of that money, then someone else is going to come up and pick up the apple bits and make something from it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a brilliant.
It helped me to think about it like that.
It's a brilliant analogy. A couple of things practical things that I did was my policy is that, because all my teachers taught at other studios, is all that I asked them is not to promote the other studio. It's pure and simple. And I said, if a client comes to you and says, hey, when are you teaching at this other studio? They could respond. It wasn't but they're not actively. And the other thing I asked them is, please wear our swag when you're at the studio, because that that was fingers on the chalkboard for me. Because where I was in New England, there were a lot of Bikram studios and a short geography. And so that really raised my hackles. So that was a simple thing. Just, when you're here, you're here. If someone asks, you can tell them. And in response to, like, someone says, oh, I saw this on Instagram, a simple response is, hey, DM me on Instagram and I'll answer you there, right? Just train your staff to say things like that. So we can't stop the clients from asking the teacher about things they've seen on Instagram. We can put some guardrails in place to say, hey, if this happens, please, this is how to respond. You say, hey, that's great question. DM me on Instagram and we can talk about this outside the studio. So if you just give your staff those parameters, I think that will go a long way. And yeah, to Vicky's point, I wasn't interested in doing, at least at the time, retreats or YTTs. So my policy was, if you want to do something, I will put a poster up on the bulletin board. Just, and you can do that and just have it there. As people walk by, you can promote it on your own stuff. I will put a poster up and that's it. And so I was mentioning I worked with a studio yesterday, and we were talking specifically about this and how it would work. If you want me to help promote, then this is what I will do for you. And then this is what it will cost. For instance, if they want to have access to, you want to send an email about it, or you want to do this, or you want to do that, we will do that for you. And we will bill you for the admin time to do it. We're not going to take any money for it. But if you want to use our clients and advertise to our clients, we'll post on. If you want us to do that, we will. However, we're going to charge admin time for it because there is admin time involved in that. They think, oh, you're just going to, no, you got to send me blah, blah, blah. So there are some things you can put in place and policies and but policies and methodologies say, yeah, you want to do this, this is what it is. And again, if you have that all laid out, hopefully that will mitigate some of these other things, as well as talking about what is your policy with dating clients? What is your policy around socializing with them outside the yoga room? Everybody has a different opinion on that. And full transparency, that's how I met my partner. He was a yoga student. But I will say, when it became evident that he was more interested in just going for a cup of coffee, I went to the studio director and said, do you have a problem with this? Because if she had, this was my job, I would have said, sorry, we're not going down that road. Right. But I respected her and went to her, because I knew her policy was you don't date students. So, and then after that point, it just was like everybody just assumed we were married anyway, so it was not a problem. So anyway.
I think one of the things that you're alluding to that I would add to that, Terry, is obviously clarity in the policy or whatever. And then there's different opinions of this, but the two thoughts I'm having are, one, sometimes in writing these policies out, you have to realize that you're not going to get it right. You're not going to be able to write down, it's binary, it's this or that, it's yes or no, it's black or white. It's so many gray zones. That's what Vicky was saying. So you have to be an intelligent human being and state, like, this is the bigger objective and purpose of what we're trying to do and articulate in this general policy. And understandably, it has to be looked at critically at a case-by-case scenario, and we should just have open communication. Like you did, like you like go to the owner and be like, hey, this is what's up. That's just respectful. Now, I'm of the opinion, this didn't happen to me, but if I somehow started dating someone and I went to the owner that I was working for and I'm like, hey, I'm dating this person, like it's a serious thing, I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you that's happening. And out of respect, I'm telling you. But should it even, like, it would need to be that it actually matters, like it's something that's worth bringing up. I think that one of the policies we had in our studio wasn't the don't date the students. It was don't fuck around. We kind of said it like that internally. We didn't have it written like that, but it was like, this isn't a place for you to have a dating pool. That's where that's unprofessional. And that's not what this is.
It's not Match.com.
It's not Match.com. You're not swiping whatever direction it is, on people. If you're the yoga teacher, that's silly. And that makes the environment unsafe. So you absolutely can't do that. On the other hand, if you meet someone here and then like you're out and about and you meet them at the coffee shop and like you really like this person and you start dating, like, I can't control your personal life. Don't hide that. Like, keep things professional. Be aware of the position that you're in, which is a position of authority within the studio. That alludes to, like, the reason that conversation, we never really had an issue with our team on it at all, was because we really spent the time up front, especially in hiring everyone, to go through, like, what is the bigger purpose and principle of what we're doing, and what does professionalism look like in a studio? This is the why factor about it. And that goes the same thing, like promoting a retreat or whatever else. Sometimes you have to help reframe. Even at an onsite, we've had this conversation where it's like, look, if I come to the studio and I buy a membership at the studio, and then while I'm in the studio, someone who is there in the trusted authority position who I'm coming to take their class starts promoting me to do business with another business and spend more money and do this other thing, and it's not like part of that studio community's event. It's like, yeah, hey, thanks for having me in this community. Why don't you come over here and do this other thing? That is kind of rude to the clients. That's not what they're there for necessarily. So that's what we're trying to avoid, is the feeling that they're entering into a space that's no longer safe for their mind to rest, because they're going to get solicited to leave the community and do something else. Like, that's the line that we can't cross. So we can have paths for promoting events that you put on or whatever else, even if it's not a financial connection, but we need to do it like the proper way, the right way. Because if all you do is come to me, Carol's running a retreat as one of my teachers, and I'm like, cool, let's promote it, Carol. And then it becomes part of the studio's thing. Like, hey, teacher Carol is running her first retreat for the first time, and it's really awesome. And there's a poster up, and a couple of the teachers announce it for, like, just a week or something like that. Like, now the community is rising up to support Carol as part of the community. And finances aside, Carol's going to be happy. The community is like, oh, this is part of what the community is doing. And, the rising tide rises all ships. So there is a way that you can do these things if you choose, without crossing that professional line. But setting the precedent about professionalism, who are we here to serve? How are they going to take this? That's the reframe that I think a lot of teachers are missing around some of these things. Carol, did you have anything like this in your studio? What's up with that?
Actually, you went the direction where my mind was going, was with the dating students. And Terry, too, you were talking about it. Is that, and it isn't always black and white. There are gray areas, but you do, I don't know. We did have an instance where it's like, this couple was dating a teacher and a student, and it's like, well, they're in love. I was thinking about how, yeah, that was fine, because it wasn't just messing around with lots of people, right? It wasn't. But then we also had a desk person after the first class of the student come in, run after him after class and say, here's my number. And it was like, you can't do that. Like, it's surprising that people and the guy never came back. So just I think the professionalism, what you're saying, Josh, is important, but you can have these policies in place. You can prepare as much as you want to. Things aren't always black and white. So, as the owner, I think having that open communication with your staff is so important. And so that they feel like they can come to you and talk to you about, a retreat they want to do, or let's work together, that kind of thing. So anyway, yeah, that's where my mind was going during that whole discussion.
That's a hilarious story. He never came back again.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. See, that's a perfect example. Like, her intentions were probably, well, obviously her intentions were positive, but then that makes sense, because then they have to re-enter the space and be like, yeah, this is awkward. Like, that's the part that would need to be avoided.
There was, at the studio I used to teach at, actually was when I was managing the two locations, there were a couple, they came together, they were living together. Then the woman decided to go to teacher training. So she went to teacher training. So she came back and she's teaching at the studio. So now she's a teacher, but of course they'd been living together before, no problem. But then they broke up. And then that became a big drama, because she went to the owner and said, I want you to tell him he can't come anymore. And I give him a lot of credit. He said, that's not how it works. Right? Is if he's probably not going to book your class, probably not going to take, and if he does, then you're just going to, it's sort of like he took that, he's like you said, he stood up and said, and then, however, she started some locker room talk with some of the other women, and then it became this whole little tempest in a teacup. And they were going to the owner and saying, hey, blah, blah, blah. And that just, again, but he stood up and said, look, this is not our business. If this person chooses to continue to come practice, we are here to support him. And that was, so sometimes it's you have that opposite thing there too.
Well, this goes back to our original conversation of like, can you imagine, like, if you take the context and change it, right? I like bicycles and motorcycles. I like anything with two wheels. So imagine you own a bike shop and you break up with someone or separate with someone, and then you go into your bike shop where you get your bike service, and you're like, hey, I don't want you to service my ex's bike anymore because you're my bike shop.
Yeah.
What you would, I don't want the chance of me being in here in the spring when I'm getting the bike service before, that I would run into them and whatever else. Like, I know it's a little different because of frequency of the studio, but like, or a coffee shop. You both have a favorite coffee shop you go into. One of you just wouldn't go to the coffee shop or leave when the other person is there. You would never go to the coffee shop owner and be like, hey, can you ban my ex?
Yeah.
Like, it's fucking insanity that would even come up in a yoga studio. And this story you're telling happens all the time. Like, we see it all the time. I had the same thing happen in our studio too. And we did the same thing. We're like, hey, dude, like, no, that's not. And they're like, well, can you just tell me if they book a class? I'm like, no, I'm not going to look at the class roster and like ring you up if you guys happen to be in the same class. No fucking way. Are you crazy? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, yeah, I don't know. That's the kind of stuff where rather than playing into the drama, playing out of it is sometimes the best path. I wouldn't start here. I'd be like, no, we're not playing that game. But if it got bad and there's all the rumor stuff or whatever, I'd be like, fine. I canceled both of your memberships. Yeah. See you later.
Good luck with your shitty life.
Like, figure it out. Come back when you want to just do some yoga, because that's what we do here is yoga. I don't know. I get a little ranty on it, but all right. Coaching. What's coming up in coaching calls? Carol, what have you been seeing? Where's your focus been recently with coaching with your clients? Any trends that you're seeing?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I just have been onboarding some new people, so it's really exciting. So we always go back to numbers. I mean, how much can we talk about it? Like, know your numbers is always top of mind with clients. Yeah. And like I said, I think my big thing right now is I'm super excited for one of my clients who's about to open. So this is such a timely discussion to talk about these kinds of things and boundaries and, but there are gray areas all the time. So getting prepared for, I hope she watches this because, it is one of those things that you can't really be super prepared for, but you are going to have a lot of opinions coming at you. And I was thinking about it earlier too. It's like, I think when you're talking about raging against the machine and people knowing it's not a machine, I think that gives people, that's why they have power to go directly to the owner. And that to them is really like, I can make a change if I talk to the owner about this thing, whereas like a big corporation, you talk to a manager and, oh, I didn't get the answer I wanted, then I go to the next person, right? So I don't know, that's where my mind was going to, was like, you will have a lot of opinions coming at you. I don't know, it's an interesting seat to be in as a yoga studio owner. And I do think, like we've talked about, it's different than other businesses, like point blank period.
Yeah.
And so that's what's coming up in my coaching.
What you're highlighting is like, it's not even entirely a negative indication that people feel comfortable enough to come to you. It's just like the double-edged sword of the situation. So, you know, we don't want to view it only from the negative light, but I love what you said. I totally agree. You can't access the big giant corporation that you would like to fight back against. Like you can't access that person directly. So it's like, because you have the potential influence and control at a studio level, you think that then you can. So unless you're in France and you're rioting in the streets because of BlackRock and all these other things, like that's what it takes to make noise around those larger entities, and still debatably has minimal impact. But yeah, it's kind of a positive thing. Numbers, what just real quick, like for a brand new studio, what are the primary numbers? Because what numbers do you look at, or what do you planning around numbers when you're new, because you don't have any numbers yet, like you don't have any data to look at, so it's more around like projecting and whatever else. Where have you been focused on that?
Well, early on when, we're working with a studio that's about to open or is looking to open even, we obviously want to look at the expenses and see how much we need to cover this expenses, including owner pay and including desk staff, because we always think teachers, but desk is so important. And so we look at the square footage of the space and see how many classes you'll need to run at a certain price point so you can get that coverage. So we've got some amazing calculators that will kind of help us play with the numbers and figure it out. And so the opening a studio module system that we're going through is super helpful. It's the very first thing we're doing, really, is looking at that. So if you're opening, let us know. Let us coach you through it.
Yeah, book a free coaching call with Carol, and she's done a few of these, and we'll get you hooked up. I like what you're saying about the expense planning. It's hard to plan expenses because you might be blind to some of it. So we have some systems and formulas to help you plan that. But you're right. It's the bigger expenses that are like harder to change. The lease, but then staff. Those are your top two expenses, period. Getting that right in your planning up front can make a huge difference in your personal stress level. This is another one of those things that can stress you out. Like after the fact, you're like, I didn't really budget for this, but it would sure be nice. And then, a lot of studios come to us and then we're working with them after they've been open for 5 years. They still don't have any front desk or sales team. We're like, you need to have a front desk and sales team. And they go like, well, I can't afford it. And it becomes this weird chicken and the egg situation where, from a coaching perspective, we sometimes, not in all cases, but we sometimes have to say like, you can't afford not to. Like, you're going to have to just suck it up for 3 months and figure out how to make this expense happen if we want to get things moving forward, because it's very clear that like that's the path. So if out of the gate you're planning for it, then that's not stressful. You don't end up in that chicken or the egg situation. You just end up with the chicken. I don't know which one it is actually.
I've been working with the studio. She's not, we did the numbers like Carol mentioned, looking to open a studio, and booked a call with me to go through. She had a potential space. She hadn't signed the lease yet. And she's not in a rush to open a studio. And we looked at the numbers, we looked at the lease, we ran it through the calculators we have. And at the end of the day, she's like, because it was in a really good location in a prime spot of town, all of these things. And of course, the lease was accordingly. And she was like, it was going to take too long for her. She's like, no, I just knew this wasn't, she said, I'm so, she was like, so thankful that we had done that, because she realized that this is what it was going to take to get it to the point where the studio was profitable, and the classes and how much and all that kind of stuff. So that's the other thing that can be too, is you're looking to open a studio and you haven't booked a space and you're looking at spaces. If you have the idea of what the lease is going to be, then that's a good place to start. And then we can look at all the other numbers. And then from the lease, we can back out, okay, like you said, how many classes, what are you going to pay? So we can fill in some of those other numbers. But if you look at the numbers, it's 70% of your revenue covers staff, lease, utilities, and you, owner's pay. That's 70%. So based on those, we can figure out some budgets and things like that. And if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I've been in business a long time, how do we can help you reset it. And I'm just kind of going back to, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, you want to put some policies in place and you don't have them in place yet. Here's the beauty of being the owner. You can make changes. You can make changes to your policies. You can make changes to your contracts, right? With your teachers, you can change their pay. What you just need to be prepared for is, if they don't like the new structure, they may choose to self-select, which I guess is the new word for, quit. They choose to self-select, and that's okay. Right? So you never want to run your business from a position of fear. And sometimes you're fearful of changes, particularly around staff and pay, because your fear is that they're going to quit. And then what do? Well, we plan for that. So just wanted to throw that out there. Well, if you're out there as well, if you're brand new starting out, or whether you've been in business 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, we've got your back. Carol, Vicky, I mean.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's really hard to do these calculations on your own if you have not owned a studio before, because you just don't really have the knowledge about what's required. So I would, again, just really reiterate what Carol said: book a call with us before you get into it and before you sign the lease to get some help if you've not owned a studio before, because it's tricky.
Knowing your numbers, whether you don't know what your numbers are or you got the numbers, we can help you figure out where they should be. I think, Vicky, it's oftentimes you're going to open a studio, you're not aware of some of the costs, and also not aware of how packages work and pricing options and all of that good stuff. So that's where we as a group can help with that, because we have collectively, I don't know how many have we added up collectively, how many years of studio ownership we have. I mean, it's got to be close to, like, I don't know, 40 or 50 collectively years of studio ownership. So so yeah, anything else you've noticed in calls, Vicky? Kind of
something I was thinking about recently was so apps, studio software apps. Are they sometimes a part of the problem rather than a part of the solution?
Interesting.
It's specifically, it's like getting people to buy your intro and not buy a drop-in. That was the problem that we were trying to address. And the problem in this case, we came up that the problem is actually, it's the app. Because whenever people go in to book a class, the first thing they're presented with is, would you like to buy a drop-in? Would you like to pay for this class with a drop-in? It's the number one option. And there's no way to switch it off in the app. You can't do it. So this is just one app. I just recently started looking into this. And then I'm thinking, like, what about the other softwares out there? What do they do? Do you know for your own studio? Do you know what they do? What actually, which pricing options are they pushing to people? I think it's very common to not have gone through like a booking process or a purchase process as a client when you're the studio owner. It's like, no, I checked it, like, you checked it like 5 years ago, maybe. And things have been changed and updated, and maybe you aren't looking for the right things. So yeah, that's something I've been thinking about.
That's interesting, because I know that we ran into that with one of the last week, is they present the lowest pricing option. And in this case, and it was causing issues, because in this case it was, even though we said it's student drop-in only, blah, 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 they had and people were buying the student drop-in, not even realizing that it was a student drop-in, because people don't read. They go to book a class, oh, I need a package, here it is. So yeah, I think, Vicky, that's a really good call out, is the technology hindering us? And if that's the case, then maybe there's another workaround. As much as convenient as apps are, and if that's the case, maybe you don't send them to the app, you send them to your website, and you make sure that it's easy to book a class and buy a package on the website, you know. So
just go through it. It's part of our Leads to Members one-on-one coaching program. I'm very, very grateful that we are now doing this with all of our coaching clients, that we first of all, we go through the numbers, and then, you know, a couple of modules later, we go through the process. We look at what is the process of people coming to your website, finding you, like, what do they see? What are the number of clicks? What's like the purchase process? What does it look like? It's a really important step. And yeah, I'm really glad that we do this now with all of our coaching clients, because now we're uncovering these problems that we didn't really understand where they were coming from before.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing is, I have a couple of clients, I did it myself, and unfortunately you can't do it in Walla, but turn off your drop-in. Don't sell your drop-in online. That's what I stopped. And I know that can create issues, and like if you want people to register ahead of time. But there's a simple solution right there. Stop selling the drop-in online. And maybe we did this at a client earlier this year. We stopped selling the drop-in because people are buying the drop-in instead of their intro. And we created a 3-pack so if people wanted that, it was a higher price point than the intro. So the intro was presented first in this situation, and the 3-pack it was 3 classes for $99, which made it $33 a class. Right. So there are some things maybe you can do in that situation. If you don't want to sell a drop-in, you want to make sure that people are seeing your intro offer, maybe you do something similar. I don't know. So you can get really creative with some of your solutions to how to drive people to your intro offer, whatever it may be, whether it's direct to membership or whatever that can be. There can be some strategies to kind of workarounds for software, things like that, for apps and things like that. So yeah, we can figure something out. We always do. Anything else? I know Vicki and I've got a call coming up together to get ready for the August webinar, which is coming up here. What day is that, Vicki, again? The 29th?
Is it? It's in my calendar, so it's not in my head anymore.
Okay, let's just double check. It's the 22nd. I'm glad I checked. So August 22nd, coming up here in a couple of weeks, we have our webinar, and it's going to be on the 5 things to make your free yoga weekend smashing success, right, Vicki? Or something to that effect.
Yep, exactly that.
Yeah.
So 5 top things to do. You can do a million things for doing an open house or a free yoga weekend, but we are going to focus on the 5 most important ones.
Right. And also we've got coming up next week on the 8th of August, 8/8, is our group open group coaching. So if you've never had a call with a coach, if you're wondering what a coaching is all about, every 4 weeks we have an open group coaching call where the coaches jump on. You can ask your questions, get help and support around that, not only from the coaches, but from other YC community members. So that happens next Tuesday, the 8th, and then the webinars on the 22nd. These always happen at 12 noon Central Daylight Time. So and if you're not able to attend those, then if you're on a membership, you can have access to the recordings. So anyway, anything else? Any final thoughts? Close it out. All right. Well, as Kay always says, have a great weekend. Go do some yoga. Bye, guys. Vicki, 5 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Why is it not ending? There we go. End. End.